This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. As every savvy wrestling fan knows, wrestling is like a dance where a person's partner can make them look great or step all over their feet. Such was the case in the 1980s when the WWF booked its superstars against opponents whose chances of winning were as likely as Arnold Schwarzenegger winning an Academy Award. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at 10 legendary WWF jobbers from the 1980s. Before we get started though, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts.
Whether you call them jobbers, preliminary wrestlers, or enhancement talent, these wrestlers weren't in it to win, but to make their opponents look like $1 million and give wrestling fans an idea of what a superstar could do in the ring. Jobbers are part of wrestling's formula of selling the sizzle, not the steak, with many wrestling promoters believing that TV matches, with occasional exceptions, should bring fans to house shows, which at the time were promoters' main source of revenue, not engage them with competitive matches on TV. TV wrestling, although there were exceptions such as in Mid-South Wrestling, rarely featured competitive matches. Instead, they were a 1-hour block of paid programming designed to attract fans to house shows, where fans could see a promotion's top stars battle each other. While preliminary wrestlers were booked to lose against name opponents, this wasn't a reflection on their ability to work. Indeed, jobbers had to be capable wrestlers in order to sell their opponents' moves and make them look like dynamite. Jobbers came from various backgrounds. Some were former greats whose star had fallen with age. Others were up-and-coming performers looking to make a name for themselves. Others were capable wrestlers who lacked the look, opportunity, or X factor that made their colleagues into stars. Whatever the case, these wrestlers served a vital role in wrestling, and their contributions should never be ignored or understated. The 1980s WWF, like all promotions, had many jobbers, but for this video, we're focusing on wrestlers who not only did well as enhancement talent, but who also had at least one shining moment that made them stand out from their contemporaries. Victor Marcado. If ever someone achieved legend status with just one match, it was Victor Marcado. Unless you're a member of Mr. Marcado's family, you're probably scratching your head wondering if you're watching a bonus episode of Who's That Wrestler? No, this hapless competitor was involved in one of wrestling's funniest matches when he took on Intercontinental Champion Don Muraco during the October 15th, 1983 episode of All-Star Wrestling. Muraco was engaged in a brutal feud with Jimmy Superfly Snuka at the time, and Marcado was both a tune-up match and a chance for Muraco to enjoy a snack. Talk about multitasking. Muraco's manager, Captain Lou Albano, was at ringside, but rather than just offering his sage wisdom to the Magnificent One, he also provided him with a meatball bomber. Albano climbed the ring steps between the moments Muraco manhandled Marcado and fed him the sandwich. Announcer Vince McMahon was puzzled by the behavior, repeatedly asking if Muraco was breaking any rules. Muraco also enjoyed a drink of Coca-Cola, although some claim it was a Pepsi, and even offered a sip to the referee. Muraco took another bite of the bomber as he hoisted Marcado up for his finisher, the reverse pile driver, better known to today's fans as the tombstone pile driver. The hijinks weren't over though. As Muraco and Albano returned to the dressing room, Albano slipped on a piece of the sandwich. Both Muraco and the referee came close to busting a gut, while Marcado suffered one of the most humiliating defeats in jobber history. Not until Vince McMahon had wrestlers routinely embarrass jobbers by draping snakes on them, stuffing their mouths with a $100 bill, or cutting their hair would enhancement talent be so embarrassed. Although Victor Marcado only appears to have wrestled for about 4 years in the WWF, there's no record at CageMatch.net of any other activity. He left his mark in wrestling history with his magical moment. Frank, aka Frankie Williams. I'm not afraid of nobody, Mr. Piper. With these words, Frank Williams took a stand for every preliminary bum who stepped into a WWF ring and usually came up short. Piper warmed Williams up for an abrasive interview on Piper's Pit by asking Williams where he came from. Frank said he was from Columbus, Ohio, about the only answer viewers could understand, as Williams made color commentator Bruno Sammartino sound like Laurence Olivier by comparison. Piper asked Frank about his win-loss record, and like any good attorney, Hot Rod already knew the answer. Not many. Piper berated Williams' competence, or lack of, in the ring, pointing out his lack of aggressiveness and even insinuating that Frank was a coward. Williams wasn't having any of that, and mumbled something about not being afraid of nobody and telling Piper he gets in the ring every night. Unfortunately, the Rowdy Scott had enough and unloaded on Williams with various strikes, telling the audience, "Just when you think you got all the answers, I changed the questions." For those of you wondering, Frank did win an occasional match, including a glorious win over Mr. X at a WWF show held at a high school in Lindenhurst, New York on September 30th, 1982. Elo Marino. Elo Marino began competing in 1984, working as an enhancement talent where he lost in singles and tag team matches. However, Elo had his moment in the sun when he appeared on an episode of Piper's Pit. Elo's appearance on the Pit was largely to put over the addition of Rowdy Roddy Piper's bodyguard, Cowboy Bob Orton. Piper told Elo he'd grown tired of punks like Marino trying to make a name for themselves on the show, hence his new friend. Marino made the mistake of saying any man wearing a skirt should need a bodyguard. This led to Orton distracting Elo and Piper socking him. Ace Orton and Piper dropped the dogs on Elo as Piper howled, "Get up, Elo!" Although Elo would remain a jobber in the WWF, he transformed into Ricky Santana, who enjoyed some success in Puerto Rico's World Wrestling Council. Rusty Brooks. Rusty Brooks certainly looked the part of a jobber. Overweight, he moved slowly in the ring, and didn't have much of an offense. Nonetheless, he somehow earned a non-title match against WWF champion Hulk Hogan on the November 9th, 1985 edition of Championship Wrestling. Like most enhancement talent matches, this was all about Rusty's opponent, as the match was used to build up the budding house show rivalry between the Hulkster and Randy Macho Man Savage. Before the match, the lovely Elizabeth got on the microphone and asked why Hulk Hogan never wrestles better competition. The lovely one's comments were borderline heel, a sign that WWF was still fine-tuning her role as the kind, long-suffering beauty to Randy Savage's beast. Hogan turned his attention to Savage outside the ring, allowing Brooks to attack him from behind. To no one's surprise, Rusty ate a leg drop and counted the lights for the Hulkster. After the match, the Macho Man hit Hogan with a flying axe handle, but the Hulkster quickly regained the upper hand and Savage hit the bricks. While this match was the apex of Rusty's wrestling career in the WWF, Brooks enjoyed some success later on in Global Championship Wrestling. He also launched a wrestling school. Trainees included future stars Gangrel and Norman Smiley, to name a few. Jose Luis Rivera. Jose Luis Rivera was a versatile enhancement talent that could work many different roles. One was to make opponents look good, but there was an added factor in this, making an opponent look like a beast. Such was the case when Rivera squared off against Intercontinental Champion Greg the Hammer Valentine, who had injured previous Intercontinental Champion Tito Santana when he captured the belt. Valentine was more than a heel who liked to win. He liked to hurt people, and Rivera would serve as an ideal example. Here, Valentine not only defeated Rivera with his figure four leg lock, but he reapplied the hold after winning, leading to Rivera doing a stretcher job. Jose later competed alongside Randy Colley, aka Moondog Rex, in the original Demolition Smash as the masked team The Shadows. This didn't help Jose's win-loss record, nor did his later team with veteran Jose Estrada. However, he and Estrada achieved some notoriety when they too donned masks, competing as the Conquistadors. The Conquistadors would win occasional matches against notable teams such as the Killer Bees, the Rougeaus, and the Rockers. Their biggest claim to fame was competing at 1988 Survivor Series, where they nearly won their team's match, only to be eliminated by the Powers of Pain, who ironically turned heel during their match on the babyface team, the Duke of Dorchester. Pete Doherty is another reminder of how enhancement talent can carve out a niche for themselves while still performing their role to make their star opponents look nothing short of amazing. Nicknamed the Duke of Dorchester due to the county where he lived, Pete was well respected by his fellow wrestlers, and his goofy mannerisms earned the fans' appreciation. Like some of his fellow jobbers, the Duke also competed under a mask, in this case working as the Golden Terror. The Duke had his moment in the sun when he lost to the Junkyard Dog on the first episode of Saturday night's main event, and the WWF even used him as a heel color commentator on occasion. Barry Horowitz. If ever a jobber epitomized self-assurance, it was Barry Horowitz. Horowitz worked in the WWF in the early 80s and returned in 1987 after a successful mid-card run in championship wrestling from Florida. Horowitz's winning ways were over in the WWF, but he stuck out from other hapless wrestlers thanks to the vest he wore with a handprint on the back. This allowed Barry to pat himself on the back before the match. Horowitz would enjoy him on his push in the 1990s, but that's a story for another day. Special Delivery Jones. While some jobbers are hapless, an elite few rise to the level of what some fans have called jobbers to the stars. SD Jones was definitely one such wrestler. SD mastered the art of making fans think that this would be the match where he finally defeated a named wrestler. As opposed to another jobber, SD almost always gave his opponents a tough fight, and he even had his signature headbutt and flurry of punches. Jones had several claims to fame, including losing to King Kong Bundy at the first WrestleMania in record time. He also tied in a battle royal with Tony Atlas, with the two men flipping a coin to determine the winner. Naturally, SD lost the coin toss. However, his biggest claim to shame was when Andre the Giant chose him as his tag team partner to take on the titanic team of Big John Studd and World's Strongest Man Ken Patera. Fans tuning into this TV match wondered why on earth Andre would pick Special Delivery when he had many other better qualified wrestlers to team with. As always, SD started the match off strong, but when he was thrown out of the ring, he landed hard and was incapacitated for the rest of the match, effectively turning this into a handicap match. This was the infamous match where Patera and Studd beat Andre senseless and then cut the Giant's hair. While SD counted the lights, he was immortalized in the WWF's LJN action figure lineup, and if the stories of merchandise checks are accurate, Jones likely did okay for himself. Jones' contributions were acknowledged with the 2019 WWE Hall of Fame induction. Steve Lombardi. With a career counting the lights dating back to 1983, Steve Lombardi wrestled some of wrestling's biggest names and lost to them as well. Who would have thought that Lombardi's stretcher job after losing to the Iron Sheik on the October 29, 1983 episode of All American Wrestling would lead to even bigger things? Lombardi spent the next 6 years perfecting the art of losing. Along the way, he also served double duty, donning a mask on occasion to serve as Kamala's masked handler, Kim Chi. Steve's sweat and toil paid off when Bobby Heenan chose him as his new protege, with Lombardi replacing Heenan's previous client, the Red Rooster. Heenan gave Lombardi a makeover, although you have to wonder how much the brain budgeted for Steve's new duds, transforming him into the Brooklyn Brawler. The Brooklyn Brawler made a big debut, ambushing the Red Rooster and Gorilla Monsoon on Primetime Wrestling. The Brawler then feuded with the Red Rooster and even worked a match on Saturday night's main event. Although the switch to the Brooklyn Brawler didn't take him far, his brief moment in the spotlight and dedicated service to putting opponents over makes him a legend in our eyes. Mario Mancini. Like everyone on our list, Mario Mancini had his 15 minutes, or more like 15 seconds of fame. Mancini debuted in the WWF at the tender age of 18. Mario Mancini showed some daring and incredible stupidity during the November 13th, 1988 episode of Wrestling Challenge, when he was booked to face the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. DiBiase, apparently not wanting to break a sweat, offered Mancini some big bucks to lay down for him. Given Mancini's record, he should have taken the money and counted the lights. Instead, he decided to show off by grabbing the money from DiBiase and bailing out of the ring. Showing the same lack of common sense that led to his many losses, Mancini exited the ring without an easy escape route. DiBiase's bodyguard Virgil and the $1 Million Man cornered the hapless jobber, beating him senseless and recovering the loot. DiBiase then made short work of Mancini. Mancini also had the honor of being The Undertaker's first opponent in a singles match in 1990. Do you remember these lovable losers? Do you miss the days of jobbers and jobbers to the stars? Who were your favorites? Share your thoughts in the comments section and let us know if there's any videos you'd like wrestling's greatest moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about wrestling's greatest moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.